Hey guys, so for this episode of After ED, I wanted to talk about something that a lot of people struggle with when they're going through recovery, and that's the process of cooking again. I know that a lot of people with eating disorders, they tend to try and just only really eat ready meals or things that are already prepared for them. And in those cases, they tend to only really pick the healthy living ready meals and things like that. So in reality, these things aren't really good for recovery because it's not getting you back into the normal rhythm of life. And I know that when people with eating disorders try and get back into the rhythm of cooking or continue cooking, because I know that some people do like to continue to cook, they try and cook in a way that limits all the fats, perhaps the proteins. They don't really use any oils. They cut off all the bits of fat on the meat. The vegetable to meat ratios tend to be very high. Those kind of things. And I know that it can feel as though that they're trying to do something good for themselves, but deep down they know that what they're doing is unhealthy and they want to try and get out of it. So for this episode, I just wanted to talk about what I did because I've recently started cooking again. I say recently, I mean, in the past year, I've been cooking again on my own, really. And there were some things that I did that really helped me along the way for that. However, first, I wanted to go on to the topic of ready meals that I briefly touched on earlier. I know that if you've got an eating disorder, you can find a lot of comfort in knowing the exact number of calories in a meal that you can just pick up in a supermarket. You can put it into the microwave, and there you go, you've got it. But I know from personal experience they aren't really that helpful. First of all, the choice that you've got in a supermarket is massive, and I know that people with eating disorders, they tend to get very anxious around, the idea of choice. So what does their mind revert to straight away when they're confronted with choice? Well, that's the lowest calorie meal or the meal with the lowest fat content. So when you go into a supermarket, you can feel as though you're very free to pick whatever you want. But in reality, what you're going to pick is what the eating disorder wants and not what you want on the inside. Because I remember back, I think last year, when I went into Tesco and I knew that I wanted a pizza for dinner. But I looked at the calories on the pizza thing straight away because it was reflex for me by that point. And I saw the number of calories in it and I was just kind of like, nope, put it straight back. And I think I grabbed some sort of healthy living, low fat chicken and noodles that was, it was a stupidly low number of calories. It didn't fill me up at all, but the eating disorder was happy. I wasn't. The other thing about ready meals is they don't really teach you a thing about portion sizing. So that when you ultimately try and get back to cooking, you don't really know what a portion size looks like. Ready meals, they tend to be a lot smaller in size. Even though they have X number of calories in them, they don't represent what should be a normal portion when you're cooking at home. So when you ultimately try and start cooking again, your mind ultimately reverts back to what you've seen in the ready meal. So you portion yourself out something that's a lot smaller than what you should be having. The other obvious thing about ready meals is that they are quite expensive. I remember back when I was having ready meals for lunch and dinner, it would burn a hole through my pocket. I had a limit of around £10 per day to spend on food, and ready meals would take up anywhere between £6 and £8 of that limit. And bearing in mind I had other things to eat during the day like breakfast and snacks, ready meals would take up a massive chunk of that budget. And what it ended up being was I would be eating ready meals that I didn't really want to be eating in the first place because the eating disorder was picking them for me. And the snacks and breakfasts that I would be having would also be things that I didn't like having because I didn't have much money for them. And I suppose when you're recovering from an eating disorder, one of the things that you should be doing is picking out foods that you truly enjoy eating. Because one of the aspects of getting around the anxiety around food is having things that you actually enjoy eating. This is why I started to do challenges for myself when I was eating out at restaurants, for example. If you haven't seen the link, if you haven't seen that video, I'll link it down to you in the description box below. But what I did was I ultimately tried to eat foods that I wanted, not what the eating disorder wanted to have. And not only did it get me over the anxiety of maybe eating a food that was a bit more fatty than what the eating disorder would like, but it was also getting me back to eating foods I liked, and it put me into a more positive mindset so that I felt happier within myself, and that really did help me along the way when I was recovering. So, what are the things that I did to help me when I started cooking again? Well, the first thing that I did was I just said to myself, I'm powerless to cook normally from the get-go. So what I did was I asked a friend to help me with cooking. And the reason why I did this was twofold, really. First, I needed the support because I know that I would have made bad decisions if I just did it on my own. You know, I would have just left out the oils, I would have cut out all the fats and the meats, you know, all those unhealthy habits I didn't want to be doing when I was on the road to recovery. The other thing is I needed a rational mind in the equation. This mind does not have an eating disorder, and they don't know what's going through my mind, but what they do know is how to cook. They know all the things that people normally do. So if they can spot me doing something abnormal, they can pick up on it almost straight away, really. So it's nice to have that safety net, really. The next thing that I did was I cooked from a recipe. I didn't do something on my own, on a whim, something that was put perhaps in my mind, because a lot of the things that were in my mind, the things that I was cooking previously, were just, I called them eating disorder meals. They were things that satisfied the eating disorder and not my stomach. And if I cooked from a recipe, I knew the numbers, I knew exactly what I should be putting into the pot, into the frying pan, and you know, it was all there ready for me to do. And it got me from a starting point, really, to try and start cooking again. And I don't know, maybe 2 weeks along the line of doing this, I realised that I didn't need the other person supervising me all the time. And the other person actually said that they quite enjoyed cooking with someone else because they found it a lot less boring. And they also quite enjoyed, you know, having dinner with another person on the evening. So I just said, for the time being, just let me do this on my own, see if I can do this on my own, and you know, we can come back together again. But from that point onwards, I continued to try and cook from the recipes that I was looking at, and I just found it a lot easier to do because I'd been doing it for so long, 2 weeks straight, and it was just getting a lot easier.